galaxy far, far away. And a bookshelf straight out of the 90s. From Thrawn to Dantooine and everything in between. This is Legends Look Back.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Legends Look Back, a show brought to you by Utini.com, a podcast that's just as cool as Sabayas Abs, where we talk about all things Legends, celebrating our rich EU history, as well as diving into lesser-known Star Wars classics. I'm your host, Jared Mays, and today I'm joined, once again, by the great, the legendary Freddie C. What's up, man?
It's going, man. Last week you talked about running, and I never realized that you were a runner, because I consider myself a runner as well. And I was running down the street listening to this podcast, and I just realized this audiobook, and I stopped in the middle of the sidewalk just listening to the struggle between the smugglers and the Empire, and I was probably standing there for a good 5 minutes, and I was like, oh man, I gotta keep going.
Awesome. Yeah, Meg tells me not to listen to Star Wars audiobooks when I run, because for reasons just like that. You got to listen to get hype music. You give me the credit as being a runner. Meg's a better runner than me. Meg and I follow each other on Strava. The first day I challenged her to a running competition. I was like, 3 miles. We'll see who can do it the fastest. I beat her that day and have never beaten her since. She's that kind of competitive. And so now that we have mentioned her, you've heard from her already. We are joined once again by she's the savior, honestly, of Legends Look Back. Where would we be without Meg? How are you doing, Meg?
I didn't realize you were talking to me. I'm great. I'm fantastic.
And, of course, we're glad you're fantastic. You know her and love her, of course, member of our Jedi High Council, and the greatest Mara Jade fan in the galaxy. Cheryl, who do you prefer more, Ben Solo or Mara Jade? Don't answer that. But what you can tell us, however, is, how did you come across Utini, and how did you become our number one fan? How did this happen?
I was listening to Friends of the Forest podcast by Brad Whipple, and he had a segment called A Certain Point of View, and that had Eric on it, and Eric plugged Utini and the Living Force pod and said that it was all about the EU books, and I remembered, hey, I used to read those, and I used to enjoy them a lot, so I gave the Living Force pod a listen and was instantly hooked.
Awesome.
Number one fan, I would say probably because amazing content. I love Corey's swearing and ranting, particularly.
We're a swear-free show out here on Legends Look Back, mostly.
I know,
there was that one time.
I'll try to be good, it's fine.
And it was still Corey's fault, somehow. He's never been on the show, but it was still his fault.
Love Eric's amazing hosting abilities. And I usually agree with a lot of Eric's viewpoints. So.
Yeah, don't we all? Man.
Charles's amazing roundtables. Those are always very enjoyable. Wes's Texan antics are always
I do love me some
enjoyable. Yeah, the guys just always make me laugh, and that's really important to me. So, and I have to say, community. So the Utini Discord, particularly, and spending time with all the Utiniacs in there has meant the world to me. So.
Excellent. You've talked about the Living Force, but I want to know, what about Legends? What about Legends? What's your history with Legends? How did you, when did you start reading Legends books?
Legends, I probably discovered Legends, I want to say, around the time that the Phantom Menace, the hype before the Phantom Menace, and I was going through, I used to spend a lot of time at, the bookstores. I don't know why, that was me and my friend's favorite hangout. And I was like, hey, I wonder if they have any Star Wars books. And lo and behold, there were tons. And so I luckily managed to pick out Heir to the Empire as my first Legends book.
Amazing. Perfect. What a great starting place. I mean, there's only a few that there's only a few Legends books that I think are as equal or close to equal of a good starting place as Heir to the Empire. We do have some really good news, some really exciting news, a big reveal, okay? I've teased it. Now let's see if we can actually pull it off. A couple of weeks ago, we ran a contest on the show. You remember this, Freddie? the number of books in the bookshelf contest. I of course had 410 in the bookshelf as of the time of recording the show. I now am up to 418, I think, and we of course have our winner of that contest, which is Jedi Murphy.
Woohoo!
Jedi Murphy, is that right?
Yeah, Jedi Murphy.
Okay, I thought I heard somebody disagreeing with me. Anyway, so her guess was how many? 420? And now I'm up to 418, so they're even more correct than they were, a few weeks ago, which is amazing to think that you can somehow get more right as time goes on. And the prize in the contest was, tell me your favorite Star Wars character, and I'm going to have my kids try to draw them, because I'm all about those free prizes. I'm that kind of redneck, okay? And they gave the options of Mara Jade or Baby Yoda. Well, I barely got the words Baby Yoda out of my mouth before my 6-year-old ran wild and drew not one, but 2 babies Yoda. Are you ready? Here's the big reveal. I just threw them up in the Legends Look Back Discord. Here was her first attempt. Ava, 6 years old, at Baby Yoda, who's never seen a second of The Mandalorian, mind you. This is all based off of one stuffed animal and a Christmas ornament. That's her only exposure to Baby Yoda. The first was this, in which Baby Yoda is looking kind of like a Muppet, maybe Salacious B. Crumb / BB-8. Yeah, exactly. Very proud of this one. It's almost somewhere between really cute and pure nightmare fuel, which I appreciate it for that.
I love it.
The second attempt, in some ways, is better and in some ways is worse. So let me know your guess in the chat, your preference. Do you prefer version 1 or version 2? Which Baby Yoda is the best of the 2 babies Yoda? And I will tell her tomorrow what you all think. So you got better image qualities in the Legends Look Back Discord channel. Obviously, getting my camera to pick them up is only going to do so well. So 1 or 2, which Baby Yoda was the best of the 2? What do you think?
Second one has some Pikachu vibes going on there.
Yeah, definitely major Pikachu vibes. I love that.
As a fan of art, I have to say I really love the Baby Yoda BB-8 hybrid combo. It's very imaginative. It's like a collaboration, if you will. And I really like the second one because you're right, Cheryl. It gives me like a Pikachu kind of vibe, and I dig it. So
yeah, I had not thought about that. I'll have to tell her that you said that. Yeah, I was pretty proud. She did those with no help from me, which was amazing. She's been doing her homeschool, all that online schooling, and she's right over on the other side of the wall from the collection. She's working on those, and I was pretty impressed. Gotta say, pretty impressed. If these 2 go on the refrigerator, I need to ask Jedi Murphy, do you want me to mail them? I'll mail them. But otherwise, they're going to go on the refrigerator alongside of our other babies Yoda that we've colored from like our Mandalorian coloring book. I got to tell you, we're like 2 babies Yoda away from having an entirely Baby Yoda refrigerator. Ooh. Well, you know who else loves art?
I would think since it's a prize, you should mail it.
Well,
like she should sign it.
Oh, she should. Absolutely. We'll leave it up to her. It was one of those things where it's like, do you mail things in 2020? Are we risking mailing germs across the world? I don't know how all of that works, but
that's literally how you get all your stuff in 2020 is through the mail now.
Yeah, not person to person, that's for sure. Well, you know what else I am an expert about is Legends, and we're going to be talking about one excellent Legends book tonight. Specifically, we are moving on to the explosive finale of the Thrawn trilogy with just as many clones as Dark Empire, but this time they're not as naked. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, we're going to leave it up to you. Let us know. And before we do that, though, I do want to say we got a little bit of Legends news before we move on. We'll keep this brief. They mentioned this on The Living Force this past week. There is, Freddie, I saw you getting excited about this like a whole week late to the party, but that's fine. Legends is all about, just tackling it on your own time frame. We're going to have, for the first time ever, a collected edition of the original fiction written for Star Wars Insider. And the best part about this news is that it's labeled Volume 1. Am I right?
Yeah, that's what I like about it, too. Just seeing that volume on, as a collector, right? Volume 1 is always a good sign that there's going to be a Volume 2. Maybe a Volume 3, who knows?
I've got to say, it's not always a direct indicator that there is going to be multiple volumes, But I love Star Wars Insider. I love Legends. I love those Star Wars Insider short stories from Legends, and I especially love collecting Star Wars books to put on my bookshelf. And so we're going to be able to collect them right alongside with my other Star Wars Insider volumes. I've got best of volumes 1 through 4. And so this is going to fit in nicely with those. Cheryl, how about you? You excited for this this short story collection?
It wasn't on my radar.
Okay, well now it is.
No.
No, it isn't. The correct answer is
I'm more excited about my deluxe Chaos Rising.
Oh, did you get one?
Ordered. Yes.
That's really cool. I couldn't quite pull the trigger on it, but I am happy for you. And
Awesome.
if you have a random person showing up to your house in Canada the day after we've all been vaccinated, it's not me, and I'm definitely not there to steal your deluxe edition copy of Chaos Rising. Well, we are going to be talking about a different Thrawn book, however, tonight, and that is The Last Command. Could not be more excited to be talking about this. Got to say, I finished the audiobook like 2 hours before we went live, because that's how it is done over here. Freddie, let's start off with you. What's your personal history with this? Did you read this right after the other 2 books in the Thrawn trilogy? How has this one stood out to you as opposed to the other Thrawn trilogy books?
Yeah, so I remember back when I read the first one, it was sort of by accident. I saw a Star Wars book, I picked it up, I decided to read it in a classroom, and I really liked it. The second one, I actually looked for it because I want to say that they had printed the one that I had read right after that, so it had both of the books inside. But I had no idea about the third one until maybe like 3 or 4 years after I read the second one. I didn't know where it was at. I didn't know what it was called. So I found it, I read it, and I was like, oh my goodness. And so I read the whole thing over again, like back to back, because it was just so intense to me. And I had to put it all into perspective.
That's awesome. I love that. I love that you read the Thrawn trilogy by accident.
Yeah.
And now that we have Utini.com, no one will ever read it on accident ever again, because we will show them that this is the way. Cheryl, how about you? Obviously we asked you to be on the show for this book in particular because you love this trilogy. You love Mara Jade, but what about The Last Command? We know you love Heir to the Empire, but how about book 3?
So I picked up Heir to the Empire. I started reading it, and then I went to Sweden with my grandparents, and I took it with me and finished it while I was in Sweden. And I was like, oh my gosh, I need to know what happens. And so I made my grandparents take me into Stockholm and find a bookstore, and I bought the next 2, the Dark Force Rising and The Last Command,
Wow.
at a bookstore in Sweden, and I finished reading them there.
That's amazing.
awesome.
It's an international Legends journey. I love it. Now, this is going to be an excellent question here to show off how little I know about the world. But was the copy that you bought in Sweden in English?
Yes.
And
It's
I
like-
cannot hear her
it's
anymore.
the
So
same
that's awesome.
paperback.
I will do what I can to get her back. And I'm assuming that she said yes, which is how
She
she was
did.
able to read it. Okay, yeah, thanks.
She also
Freddie,
talked
you're my
about-
C-3PO for Cheryl here.
She said yes.
Excellent. I love that. Absolutely. Well, without further ado, we're going to be getting into it here. The fact of the matter is, the behind-the-scenes background information on this is pretty much the same as it's been for the last 2 books in this trilogy. The author is Timothy Zahn. The cover art is the original cover art, which is all we're going to talk about tonight, is by Tom Young. What I will say about the cover art, though, however, Freddie, I can't let this slide. Sabayoth's chest is back, y'all. It is back.
It's
That's
back
what
and
was
it's
missing
glorious.
from Dark Force Rising. Not enough Sabayoth abs. Am I right?
Yeah. And you know what? I think just from how this book goes, right? He's got such a pivotal point in it as well that they just needed to show his abs. They had to. There was no other choice.
Oh man, I love that. I was looking at my new hardcover. Got these fairly recently, pulling it out so I could try to get it on, on the stream. And I was like, oh my gosh, there's abs on here. And I could not be more excited. Love his whole vibe. Very confident. Say what you want about Sabayoth, but I mean, he's got a strong sense of style, doesn't he?
He does, and you can tell he's very into that 70s open shirt culture. It works for him.
I was just gonna say, I was like,
Oh,
he has
absolutely.
the same
I
style
love
as my
that.
lazy ass
Of course,
stepdad
if
that
you're
walked
looking for
around
some
in his
related
house with just a
material,
bathrobe on.
you can pick up the West End Games source book for The Last Command. I've got the one for Heir to the Empire. I've been lurking a lot on thrift books and not been able to find the ones for the other two in the trilogy, Dark Force Rising and now The Last Command, but there are West End Games source book. If you want to do some role-playing over the holidays, grab your family members over Zoom, please, and do you some Thrawn Trilogy role-playing game. Might have to do some kind of a special edition of Legends Look Back where we dip our toe into that. I really have no idea how any of that works, but it could be a ton of fun. The author on those is Bill Slavicsek, or something like that. Bill, we love you. They're great. Also, there's a Dark Horse comic adaptation, 6 issues from Mark Barron and Terry Dodson, written in 1997 and then finished in 1998. So, without further ado, if you have not read this trilogy, this is your last chance. This is your last warning. Remember, folks, this is spoiler-heavy territory, and there is a couple of huge spoilers. Huge twists in this book. So if you've never read it, this is your cue. Go on out and send me a message in Legends Look Back Discord. I'll straight up, I don't know, like, there's got to be a way to share my Kindle copy, right? Can't you loan friends books? If you need to read this, I'll hook you up. Wherever you are, I'll put a mask on and drive to your house, if that's what it takes. Love these books. Can't wait for you to love them right alongside us. So, Freddie, let's do this thing. Honestly, it's a tale as old as time, really, if you think about the plot. For The Last Command, boy meets girl, right? Boy falls for girl. Girl has a personal vendetta instilled in her mind as the dying command of her evil wizard master and has to kill the boy's clone, who is created by an alien military tactician in his ultimate scheme to take over the galaxy and restore glory to a fascist empire. And before she can kill the clone, she also has to have an epic laser sword fight with the buff, bare-chested, deranged clone wizard with control issues who wants to mind control his own army of clone soldiers and also kidnap the boy's sister's twin wizard babies. Right? Classic. It's just classic story.
Tale as old as time.
Absolutely. Effectively, though, the plot for The Last Command revolves around a handful of questions. Zahn loves his mysteries, right? So the protagonists are trying to answer these key questions. What's Thrawn planning? Where are all these clones coming from? How do you outsmart the smartest man in the galaxy? Can Thrawn even be beaten? Is it even possible? Where do Mara's loyalties lie? And, of course, will Card and the smugglers join the fight? Are the smugglers redeemable? These are the big questions that are being asked throughout the book. We're going to tackle some of them tonight, some of them next week on part 2. Ultimately, the third and final chapter to the Thrawn trilogy opens with Sabaoth growing impatient with the fact that he's battle meditating Thrawn's forces, but all he really wants to do is creepy mind control-y stuff on Leia's Jedi babies. Please, just give me the babies. Also, how did Thrawn get all the necessary staff to man the Katana fleet? And how come all these rando Imperials all look and behave exactly alike? I guess it turns out he's got a highly efficient cloning facility somewhere, which is reason for concern. So Luke, in tandem with Talon Card, do some good old-fashioned sleuthing. The kind where you form a coalition of the best smugglers in the galaxy. Just the normal way of sleuthing. No way that's going to backfire. Mara Jade, meanwhile, is recovering from the injuries she sustained in the climactic battle to steal the Katana fleet back in Dark Force Rising. She's under the care of Winter, Leia's look-alike childhood friend and personal aide, and Mara likes none of those details about Winter. Well, in a way that would make even Corran Horn blush, Winter, being very perceptive, leads Winter to become suspicious of Mara, so she does more investigating. Wouldn't Corran be proud, Freddie, of Winter's investigation in this book?
If there's one thing that Corran loves, it's his detective background and his sleuthing around.
Winter does appear in those X-Wing books.
Yeah.
But an original Zahn character here. Anyway, where are we at in the notes? Seems like, obviously she would be able to detect some of these details about Mara, such as the fact that she knows a little bit too much about Rebel code words and is way too good at playing hide-and-seek in the Imperial Palace. She knows a lot about this place. There's more to her story than she's letting on. So, before the climactic showdown at the Emperor's not-so-secret anymore vault on the mountain on Mirkur, several key events happen, such as the birth of Han and Leia's twins, Jason and Jaina. Maybe you've heard of them. Oh, and Sabaoth also throws a tantrum that lands him in lockdown in the mountain on Mirkur. And a lot of treachery and smooth talking between Card, Niles Farrier, and the smugglers. And there's a sneaky strike team that infiltrated the Imperial Palace in order to kidnap the Solo twins, but Mara and Lando put a stop to that. But Mara got blamed anyway and is arrested. So no big deal, though, because Han and Leia love busting people out of lockup, especially since Mara just so happens to know the location of the Emperor's secret cloning mountain. Also, in order to debilitate the rebels on Coruscant, Thrawn dastardly releases an unknown number of cloaked asteroids in Coruscant's orbit. I mean, he memed them hardcore with that one, didn't he? Which really was just more annoying than anything. So, Thrawn, could you please just stop dropping asteroids up in orbit, please? Okay? It's really getting old. As our heroes ultimately try to infiltrate Mount Tantus, Mara is pretty obsessed with hearing Palpatine's dying command to kill Luke Skywalker. But she kind of hates that she actually likes Luke. Plus, Luke reveals the fact that he actually had nothing to do with killing Palpatine, and Palpatine was actually kind of a bad guy, Mara. Anyway, Mara's starting to have a change of heart, but, she really just needs to kill Luke Skywalker first, right? There ends up being a convenient surprise because it turns out Sabaoth made a clone of Luke named Luke from Luke's salvaged hand that he lost on Cloud City in that movie. Maybe you've heard of it. The Empire Strikes Back. Anyway, Vader apparently, all the way back then, had recovered the hand and the lightsaber and stashed them in Palpatine's mountainous garage. Gross, am I right? What a hoarder. What a hoarder. I mean, but I've got to hand it to him, though. I can't think of anything, honestly, better to do with an amputated hand. Can you? All in all, the final battle between Sabaoth, Luke, and Mara involves a lot of Force lightning, grandstanding from Sabaoth, flying lightsabers, surprise entrances, mind control, but eventually ends in Luke unleashing Card's Vornskers, Strum and Drang on Sabaoth, who of course forgot his pepper spray, I guess. That would have been convenient this time around. Mara satisfies the last command, there it is, the title, from Palps to kill Luke Skywalker, and thankfully Palps' hypnotic command didn't notice the extra vowel, and Mara was freed from his influence. Finally, as Thrawn had seen right through the rebels' charade and misdirection and was totally winning the big space battle at the Bilbringi shipyards at the end of the book, Thrawn was assassinated with a knife in the gut by his own Nogri bodyguard, Rook. But Thrawn died smiling because it was so artistically done. Whew, as was that introduction, am I right? So, Freddie, rate this book on a scale of 1 to 10. I think we've given perfect 10s to the last two, haven't we?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I gave like a 9.5.
Okay.
I have to go and make a copy like you do of everything that I've talked about in an archive of everything I've rated. But this one is up there for me. It reminds me a lot of it has I forget who mentioned in the chat, but it has a standard what do you call it, a trio, right? You've got the beginning, which starts off with the introduction of everything, the starting of things. Then you've got, the Empire Strikes Back kind of trilogy module, which is dark, especially Dark Force Rising. Then you've got the end, which is a celebration of sorts, but it's very satisfying, even to the end when he's smiling and he says it was so artfully done. Or so artistically done. Yeah,
we got the quote wrong on the shirt, which actually might do us a favor in terms of intellectual property. I'm not sure. We'll talk to
I think
Josh.
so. I think we're good. But it really was the way how everything was laid out and how everything happened and how Thrawn died, at the hand of his own personal special forces. And it's a beautiful book, and it's tense the whole time because you're not sure what's going on. You're not entirely sure if Thrawn's picking everything up, and then you start to see everything fall into place. But until the very end, you're not sure how everything's going to go until,
it's got a big finish.
Till the very end, so.
Yeah, huge ending. I got to say, in my rereads of this, the only thing I can ever remember about this book is when Luke slides down the wall of the city with the lightsaber, like that part. And then the other thing I always remember is Luke. But besides that, I'm always like, I don't have a clue. No idea. I have no idea what's happening in this one. So what was your score, Freddie? Did you give a number, or did you just ramble on artistically about...
Yeah. Rambled for sure. I would say this one, I really like this book. I like it a lot. It definitely gets the same rating for me as Heir to the Empire, which is a solid 10, because it brings you back around. And after the trilogy, you feel completed. Like, this is it. I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm solid.
It does come around well. How about you, Cheryl? What's your rank on this? mean, you can rank the whole trilogy while you're at it. You weren't on the other shows, so now's your moment.
I just wrote down 10.
There you go. Excellent answer. If it was any lower, we'd just go ahead and shut you off altogether. We'll just do the next episode without you. No, I'm not even sure I give this a 9. I maybe an 8.8, 8.9. I found the beginning so slow and tedious. I found all of the smuggler drama so slow and tedious. But
That's my favorite part.
Is it because I've read this 5 or 6 times? Probably. I do love the ending. However, I belly laughed today while walking my dog when Sabayoth says, "It's Luke, your clone." I belly laughed. I had somebody in their car watching me walk my dog look at me like I was deranged because I was belly laughing walking my dog. The reason, oh my gosh. However, a great book. I especially love the ending. We'll say that much about it. So, without further ado, let's get into the characters. Where else could we start but with Luke himself? I mean, just the regular Luke, sorry. Just Luke. Luke Skywalker, the good one. So, last week we talked about Empire Strikes Back, and in Chapter 7 of The Last Command, right here, Luke reflects on his impulsive rescue attempt on Cloud City, and he's got this whole inner monologue. Maybe he's saying it to somebody, I don't remember. He's like, the last time I rushed off when I thought my friends were in trouble, I lost my hand. So he's clearly learned a lesson. And Freddie, how do you think Luke's analysis of, the most beloved movie ever made shows his character growth?
He it's so funny because in the trilogy, the original trilogy, right, we see his growth. You see him go from what we all consider him a whiny farm boy to a Jedi Knight. And it's funny because you see him grow in the Thrawn trilogy as, okay, well, during that time, this is what I thought. But now, this is probably what I should think. And this is how I should act. Right? And just to give you an example, when he's fighting Jeruis, he says, leave them alone, I'll stay. And that seems very Luke, instead of just fighting him, and you can tell he's not giving into his anger. He's telling himself to calm down, and he realizes that whatever he did with Vader, he's got to remember those lessons that he did, and you can see that happening in the book, and it's pretty fascinating to see his growth.
Yeah, Thrawn trilogy Luke is a very nice boy, isn't he?
He's a very nice boy. He's exactly what you would expect a Jedi to be. Super
and
nice.
I actually appreciate that in the next trilogy, the Jedi Academy trilogy, he's definitely more fallible, and yet also more superheroic at the same time. So I can't wait for us to talk about those. Well, Cheryl, how about you? How does this show Luke's character growth for you?
I think it shows that he's gained some hubris. I think that obviously, I can imagine that you could develop somewhat of an ego if you had the ability to literally move objects with your mind and influence people with your mind and have visions of the future. So, but it's clear that Luke's learned Yoda's warning of always in motion is the future.
Oh,
and
yeah.
that rushing into situations without thinking of the consequences is never a good idea. I think, like a teenager that's grown into adulthood, he's become less impulsive, irrational, and dangerous because he's no longer acting from a place strictly of emotion. But now he's considering the consequences of his actions. And so much so that we see that now he's even thinking of the task of training his niece and nephew, and he's grappling with the apprehension of that and of being able to train them in a way that teaches them strength and with responsibility and having wisdom and compassion while also having that power. So I think that we see Luke's grown a lot since the last
I like that you
time
said
we've seen him in
he's
the
thinking about
movies.
training his niece and nephew.
Yeah.
So that's actually one of the things I like the most about this trilogy is you see Sabayoth trying to amass his own army of Force users and bend them to his image. And instead, Luke is thinking more responsibly, obviously, not a deranged evil clone, thinking about how he can train his own Jedi Order. And it is really cool that we get the introduction of... What's that?
He gets freaked out, too. He's like, how am I going to do this?
Yeah, so you do see him be a little human, which is nice, because he does come across as pretty superheroic in these books, doesn't he?
He does. He comes off heroic, right? He's coming in to save the day, but I think the part that makes him more human is he loses his Jedi ability in a good portion of the books, in my opinion, and he has to go back to feeling what it feels like to not have the Force at your side.
Okay,
And
yeah, with the Ysalamari.
exactly, yeah, with the Salamari, and it kind of shows his he's still capable. You can tell he's a warrior either way, whether he's got his powers or not. He's not as good, obviously, when he's not a Jedi, but when he is stripped of the Force, he's still very capable. Not as capable, but he still know what he's doing.
I like that a lot. The other moment in the book where Luke especially looks fallible is when we find out that Luke hasn't told Mara the truth about his parentage. So isn't it Sabayoth, Freddie, who has to reveal to Mara that Darth Vader was Luke's father?
Yeah.
No.
Yep.
No.
Who was it?
It wasn't.
I'm pretty sure.
It was the Nogri.
The Nogri.
In the forest.
Ah.
She says, "Who is the son of Vader?"
Oh,
that
yeah.
she's
Yeah.
referring
There it
to?"
is.
Yeah,
See, that's why I've got Cheryl on the
This
show
is
to
part
keep
of
us
my
honest.
notes. This is part of my notes later on, so because it's one of my favorite.
But shouldn't it have
characters.
been?
But,
Shouldn't it have been Luke who told her? By the way, I know you are a big Palpatine fan, not a big Vader fan. Vader's my dad, but here's the way it all worked out. It shouldn't. I mean, they spent all those days hanging out in the jungle back on Mirkor a couple books ago. Freddie, shouldn't Luke have been the one to tell Mara?
Yeah,
You don't want to hear that from a Nogri.
It's so funny that we bring this up because I remember when I first read that, I was thinking to myself, how could she not know? I mean, he was right there the whole time. How could he not know that? I don't know. It was one of those things that you'd expect him to say, like, oh, by the way, my dad was Vader,
But I think us as a viewer, because we know it, we just assume that everyone else in the universe knows it.
Which is.
It's not like they're just gonna go walking around being like, "Oh, guess what? Vader."
That's true.
And that's the crazy thing to think about it, right? And I've actually had a couple of people listen to this show, and they still have no idea that Luke is first of all the relation between Luke, Leia, and then Vader. So we got to take ourselves back every once in a while and think about it. Not everybody does know.
Yeah, it really caught me off guard. I was like, wait, she still doesn't know this part? Oh, this isn't going to go well. Luke does a decent job, by the end of the book, redeeming himself, but it's definitely a setback. Mara doesn't need to find out any other information that might accidentally make her finally go ahead and kill him, because this book, she's quite heavy-handed with the fact that she's going to kill him, sooner or later. I'm going to kill you. I love that when Leia eventually has this conversation with with Luke, or with Mara, that... Mara says, "I'm gonna kill your brother, and Leia's like, "Are you now?" Leia never really takes that seriously, which is just an excellent Leia moment. Before we get to that, though, as we move into talking about Mara, Luke, okay, cut Luke some slack. Luke, he does some good things, he does some bad things, but we love him, right? Mara, however, is still establishing herself in these books as an original character who's gonna stand the test of time, as for Star Wars fans. And one of the things that really sets her apart is the fact that she used to be co-workers, an apprentice even, if you think of her that way, to the Emperor himself, right? And even all the way through this book, it's not until the very end that she starts to change her perspective. She has a really different view of the Emperor, doesn't she? She's got this idea that Luke ruined her life. Luke and Vader teamed up and assassinated the Emperor. Cheryl, why do you think Mara had such a different view of the Emperor? Why? Where does her twisted perspective come from?
My perspective on this is grooming. Palpatine's a master manipulator and predator. So we learn that Mara's taken away from her family, so that's alienation, by the Emperor at a young age to do his bidding, so she's being conditioned, to where her identity is completely tied to him, so she's become dependent. So now this doesn't take away from the fact that she's trained to be resourceful, she's skilled, she's independent. However, she is absolutely shattered when he dies. Yeah. And her existence of being his servant is taken away from her because her identity is tied to him.
Blowing my mind here.
So she's very much a victim of grooming and abuse.
Oh my gosh, I'd never thought of her that way. What about you, Freddie? Have you thought of Mara along these lines?
No, it's so funny because I always try to come from like the Force point of view, right? Where we all know Palpatine is a very strong Dark Force user, and clearly, even through his death, he still has this I don't even know what you would call it, like he basically hypnotized her to always want to kill Luke no matter what. He programmed her. And Cheryl, you said it 100%. You were right on. He groomed her. He basically brainwashed her, and that's who she's become. And it took the final act, right, which was killing Luke. But it took that final act to break the dark side hold that was around her spirit, if anything, right? That's my point of view. But your point of view is right on. It's exactly.
But she's never defined as a dark user. She's neither light nor
in the
dark.
middle, yeah.
And
she doesn't know, honestly.
It's because she's not doing it for her own selfish gains. She's doing it as a servant to a master still. So it doesn't really fully open her up to the dark side. So that's why she's never like a
Can we call her a Gray Jedi? Can we do it? Can we say Gray Jedi on this podcast?
Yeah, we can say Gray Jedi.
We had a controversial conversation the other day, and maybe the Legends Look Back Discord channel, I think, with, was it Bro Dameron, who said, as soon as you say Gray Jedi, I'm never listening to the podcast again. So we want you, Bro Dameron.
As soon as you say it, I'm out.
We want you here with us. She's still got a long way to go, but no, she's definitely not. She's not wielding the red-bladed lightsaber. As soon as she picks up a red one, that's when she crosses the dark side. It's all about the color scheme, right? Well, that's a great way of looking at it. I think you're both right. I think Cheryl's more right, Freddie. But I do think that with with this last command, it does definitely seem like hypnosis, except for way stronger and way more dark-sidey. Absolutely. So, ultimately Mara, though, is redeemed. Spoiler alert. And she's still got a long way to go. Even at the end of the book, she's still like only reluctantly playing ball with Luke. She's still got a long way to go in terms of her allegiances shifting and loyalties being adjusted, which makes a lot of sense if you think of her having been conditioned from such a young age by the Emperor. But Luke, he made a lot of mistakes along the way with his relationship with Mara, especially in the whole, not telling her about his parentage thing. It's kind of a big deal. They're going to have to overcome that, and a lot of marriage counseling. But there is, of course, this key conversation that happens with Mara and Leia when Mara is recovering from her injuries earlier in the book. So, Freddie, let me ask you this. Is it more this or that? Is it more Luke or more Leia who's responsible for redeeming Mara? What do you think?
It's hard to really think about it because I think they each had their own impact. But I would definitely say, if she had not killed Luke, I don't think she would have ever been able to get over that, right? It almost seems like that was the last command, if you would, of Palpatine.
No, I can't say it anymore. It's egregiously done in the book. We're not going to say it again. But I hate it when books or movies say the title. It drives me insane.
It is pretty, yeah. Anyway, so that was kind of... But I think it took the twins to both show them what the Force... like the other options of the Force, right? Because she only knew the dark side. She only knew what was capable on that end. But she never really truly understood the other side and the rebellion, the New Republic, Luke. She didn't understand that, and she's now stepping into that worldview because she was in the fringes for a while right after the Empire, right, and never really truly got to see what the Empire or what the rebellion was doing and what their purpose was. And I think it took a lot of that to understand and for her to kind of picture it and soak it in, if anything. And of course, kill Luke. Who wouldn't?
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. Luke is not really willing to take that last step in actually executing one of these Darksiders. Luke can't bring himself to do it. Mara, however, no reservations. Totally ready to spear these suckers through the gut. Cheryl, have I asked you this question yet? Who I don't think I have. Who's more responsible for redeeming Luke? For redeeming Mara? Is it more Luke or is it more Leia?
You hadn't asked me, and I have a different response than Freddie.
Let's hear it.
Imagine that.
Ooh. I said I think Leia, because Leia planted the seed in Mara's head that perhaps the desire to kill Luke was not hers, but rather Palpatine's. She starts her on a more realized path of self-discovery and starts those wheels to really start turning. I also think that she can reach Mara on a different level because Mara isn't going to listen to Luke as much because she thinks that she hates him. So there's emotion blocking her judgment there. Leia is someone that Mara, while she may not necessarily be fond of her, I feel like Mara still respects her. And she opens up to Leia more readily, and maybe that's just being able to have a heart-to-heart with another woman, so she feels like she can let her guard down more, and maybe she would with like a man. But I definitely think that Leia is more responsible for setting Mara on the path that she eventually goes down.
Yeah, I actually kind of thought that too. She had a more sensitive touch, whereas Luke is a little more blundering, isn't he?
Yeah.
Luke's a little more clueless.
Clueless, sure. The Force definitely pairs them together, in my perspective, and it's such a great match. However, not as good of a match as Lando and Mara, who get a great scene together in this book, don't they, Cheryl?
Cheryl's favorite relationship, Mara and Lando.
Just gonna breeze right over that comment.
We had to go there. You know who else is blundering? Han Solo. Han also, like Leia, but in his own weird way, is sticking up for Mara. Specifically when Mara is arrested by the New Republic, Han makes a big stink of it. He's like, "What, are you going to arrest everybody around here?" Freddie, why do you think Han did it? I had a hard time figuring out what motivated Han to stick up for Mara. What about you?
This very much, I was thinking about this for a while because I felt what Han was feeling, and I feel like I when it comes to characters and their thoughts and how they respond to things, Han definitely says what I feel, and it's like, look, man, I know I can trust her. I feel I can trust her, and if I can trust her, like, I don't just trust anybody. And for me to feel that she is someone who wouldn't do that, like, it's unfair. And he's trying to fight for who he believes she is as a character, and he likes. You can tell that I guess they speak the same language, sort of, right? Because she did work in the smuggling kind of industry for a while, and that's definitely where Han
in the smuggling
from.
Industry.
I mean, it's an industry, right? The info industry, I guess.
Info and drugs.
And it's very much a reputation thing for Han, right? So if you can prove yourself, and you get cast into this zone that she did, which is, she's the outsider, she was part of the Empire, of course they're going to blame you. But he's like, no, guys, come on, don't be so blind, don't be so dumb to what's actually happening.
Yeah, he says, what are you going to take the Imperials' word for it? They broke into our palace. They broke into our secret base that's not so secret right here on Coruscant, and we're just gonna take their word for it.
Exactly. It's like, come on, guys, like, think about it a little bit more. Use some sense.
Go ahead, Cheryl.
Han also knows what it's like to not be above suspicion when it comes to the New Republic with his checkered past. So I think that he can relate to her in that way. And I think also for Han, actions speak louder than words. So he may not necessarily trust her 100% yet, especially when it comes to Luke, but like, Luke's a big boy, he can handle himself. But like, when he needed someone there to protect his wife and his newborn babies, she was there.
Yeah.
And every instance that he's seen with her thus far, she keeps on choosing the side of the New Republic, whether or not that's something that she always intends, but she ultimately always
she's
has.
done nothing treacherous. I like the idea that she played to Han's fatherly instincts, that she protected the babies as a dad. Hey, I don't care how you treat me. I care how you treat my wife and my kids and my dog. Treat me terribly, but be nice to the kids, all right? Please. That's excellent. We've talked about the heroes here. Let's bump it over to the villains, though. I love me some Sabayoth. Thrawn is totally eclipsed in these books for me compared to Sabayoth. What an interesting character. And in the new, this is my biggest gripe, Freddie, with these Legends reprints of the Thrawn trilogy, the ones I did a few years ago. There's no Sabayoth. We did the math from Club J. Didn't they say 275% more Thrawn on the covers?
Yeah.
But 200% less Sabayoth. It's tragic. We need more Sabayoth in this world. Let's make a hashtag. However, Sabayoth does do a number of things that are, on the one hand, horrible, obviously, but on the other hand, comical. This first one seemed a little bit too real world. It seemed a little bit close to home, and obviously Zahn didn't have our real world 2020 politics in mind when he was writing this book back in 1992, 93. But at one point in the book, pretty early on, Sabaoth makes a claim that he is the heir to the Empire. So, obviously, for me, that's the title of the first book, which blew my mind to think, was Sabaoth the heir to the Empire all along? Freddie, do you think that's what Zahn had in mind when he wrote the first book? I always thought, Luke's the heir to the Empire. He's the son of Vader. Or the double entendre there is Thrawn is the heir to the Empire. He's the new big bad on the block. But was it Sabaoth all along? It's like when I first learned that the Phantom Menace wasn't Maul.
Oh, yeah. This is a good one. I've been trying to figure this out. I think it's meant to throw us off, right? It's kind of like a red herring. There's really three options on the table. And, if you're a Star Wars fan, you kind of know who it's going to be eventually. But you've got three contenders for heir to the Empire. You've got the tactician. You've got the crazy and strong Drew Sabaoth. And then you have Luke, who kind of fits the mold of what the Jedi foretold, right? A Skywalker, or someone who's going to come in and do some stuff. But honestly,
rule the galaxy the right way, yeah.
It's a tough one. I feel like it's a toss up, and at the end we kind of know who it is. But I don't. Honestly, this is a tough one. Because they end up both the same, right? They don't make it out of this book.
Yeah, Cheryl, do you think that Sabaoth was, in Zahn's mind, the heir to the Empire the whole time? And it only took me, when was the first time I read this book? It only took me 10 years to realize? 20 years?
I honestly, I don't know. And sometimes I think that Zahn tends to do this thing where, I don't know if it was initially something that, it's like he doesn't initially always have something in mind, but in true Zahn fashion, he can always find a way to tie something in down the line, even if it wasn't something he was thinking of initially at the time of writing it. So I just think it's something that he likes to do, where he's like, hey, maybe I can go back and find a correlation there. And I think that the original title for Heir to the Empire was something different.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
And they didn't like
if anybody
it.
knows in the chat, let us know.
So they made him
I don't
change
remember.
it. But yeah.
Wild Card. It was Wild Card.
There's just so many possibilities.
Yeah. And there's a lot more entendres with Wild Card, because you've obviously got Card, whose name is, in the title. But then you've got Sabaoth's kind of the wild card in the mix, and, Heir to the Empire. It's a great title. Also a great title, Heir to the Jedi. Am I right, Meg? No, we won't. We won't deal with that one.
Absolutely not.
So on the real world side of all this, though, Sabaoth keeps talking about his entitlement. It's like he was a millennial the whole time, He's like, "Where's my participation trophy?" No. But on a scarier level, Sabaoth keeps talking about the fact that he, as the Jedi Master, he as a Force user has a right to rule the galaxy. So what in the world is he getting at here? Does a Force user actually have more of a right to rule the galaxy than any other, any other deserving person or elected official or government? Cheryl, do you think that Sabaoth is? Do you think he has a point here, or is this kind of the fallacy that led to Palpatine ruling the galaxy in the first place?
So your question on the show notes was, what right does a Force user have to rule the galaxy over any other being?
I asked
or
it
government?
Differently.
Yeah.
3 different ways.
So you just asked a little bit differently, but I put none. A single Force user has no right to rule the galaxy over any other being or government. That's dictatorship. So no matter what, a governing body needs to be comprised of beings that encompass the thoughts and intentions of all of which that belong to it. And Force users can be corrupted just as much as any other non-Force user. So just because you have the Force does not imply that you are morally superior to non-Force users and able to rule anything.
Yeah, I think you're onto it. They are morally, they're capable of slipping, and that's the point. Is they're still
Sith.
beings,
Hello.
right? Freddie, what do you think the fallacy in Sabaoth's logic is?
Well, first of all, Sabaoth was absolutely delusional. He was crazy, and everyone around him thought he was crazy. The problem is he was powerful, and a crazy person with power is going to come up with something, right? Which is, I am clearly superior to everybody because I look at what I can do that no man can do. So why can't I create a strong universe, right? Whatever it is. Why can't I create a strong universe with people that are just like me? And that just shows how delusional he was, to the point where you would read the scenes with him and Thrawn and you would roll your eyes and be like, "Oh, this guy again, like what the heck? He's just screaming and knocking people over with his voice." At least that's how I read it.
He's very unstable.
Yeah, he is.
He's very unstable.
Extremely unstable. And I think because of his instability, that just gave him some sense of delusion and grandeur. And I mean, he was crazy. I always thought he was just a crazy person. And half the time I just wish I was Han. I could just be like, "Shut up, man. I don't want to hear you."
Yeah, I would love to hear Han having a just normal conversation with Sabayoth. I'm sure that would go great. Out of all the things that Sabayoth does that are egregious, he does a lot of grandstanding, which gets old when you're reading the trilogy. Obviously, I compliment the wardrobe choice with the open-chested robe, but, other than the whole obsession with trying to control the Jedi babies thing, I think the thing that he does that bothers me the most is when he mind controls Pelion, because Pelion, he's everybody's favorite Imperial. He's so clearly morally upright, even though he's on quote-unquote the wrong side, right? Shiro, how unsettling was it when Sabayoth mind control Pelion? Did you want to throw your book across the room or what?
Yeah, it's very unsettling because it's brainwashing. So, or it's kind of like being like hypnotized and then you don't recall anything you just said or did. Having someone else control your mind is like hell scary. But I think what was scarier was what he did was to General. Is it Cabell?
That was creepy.
I say Cabell. Yeah.
I think that was scarier because he like legit replaced chunks of his mind with his own desires and didn't do a good enough job of it in Zen and Covell Dawn.
Yeah.
It was like botched.
Well, and I think that was important that we got that in the book
like,
because it's something that's going to come up a lot in Legends. The ethics of mind control and even forced persuasion, and some people take more liberties with it than others. Looking at you, Jason Solo, it's something that comes up a lot, and I like that Zahn establishes that as a big no-no early on in Legends. Don't you think, Freddie?
Yeah, I mean, persuasion and all of that is I mean, persuading someone is literally changing their will. Right, and changing someone's will, whether it's for good or bad, is one of those ethical questions of, you've got a group on this side and you've got a person on this side. Which way do you run the train?
Yeah.
And honestly, of course, if someone does it for the good of something, you can just brush it off. But bending someone's will, especially when it's someone that we all consider to be similar to us, right? Or if it's like someone yells at your kid, you'd be like, "No, you can't do that. Only I can yell at my kid."
Yeah. Nobody else gets to mind control Pelion, especially not you, Sabayoth. I'm always looking for these biblical connections. And I know, all right, hey, don't want to get too religious with all of this. However, I'm a preacher. You can't stop me. At one point, Sabayoth really got me going when he said he wanted to create these Jedi babies in his own image. Did you catch that part? He says, that he wants to reform them in his own image. And that language specifically, comes from Genesis to say that God created man in his own image. And I think that Zahn is intentionally trying to tell us that Sabayoth is trying to make himself into his own God. Don't you think, Cheryl?
So, even if God created man in his image, he still gave him free will.
Yeah.
And I always call him Kabath, so sorry, I pronounced his name wrong, but he doesn't want the twins to have free will. He wants them to have his will alone. So he wants to reform all beings, whether they be like the twins or the clones or whatever, to the extension of his will for his sole purposes and desires. So that is peak narcissism and psychopathy. So he's a psychopath. So
I love that point about free will. You're schooling me on my own book on the Bible here.
I don't think he's just trying to play God. He is just literally trying to have everyone be him.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. Man, Cheryl's taking us to the theological deep end tonight. If you don't grab onto something, we're all going to drown. Freddie, what do you think? Do you think that Zahn's trying to make a biblical allusion here?
It's funny.
Or am I just looking for it too hard?
No. I can kind of see it. Someone in the chat just pointed out how interesting, the initials of Jesus Christ and George Sabaoth. And we have like a bootleg version of a bootleg delusional version of Jesus Christ. Like, this is probably how he would be, right? Just absolutely crazy, going about things the wrong way. Like, I see where you're going, buddy, but you're totally on the deep end. You got to come back over here, put the floaties on, and come back. Yeah, and you definitely see that he wants.
Sabaoth would not want to wear floaties.
No, he would just not. Yeah, he would not do that. He's got his abs. He's good enough. He can float. But yeah, so in terms of the whole God thing, you can see that. I mean, when he said in my eyes, when he said that he's the heir to the empire of the entire universe, I mean, he's expecting everybody in the entire universe to bend to his will, just like Palpatine. But I also feel like Jerus is coming at it in such a delusional way that he thinks he's doing good. And that's the scary part.
Right.
To me.
Yeah, that really is. We're going to talk about that more next week. The other villain, however, before we move on to our other villain, I got one final Sabaoth question here, okay? And Freddie, I don't know how much TV you watch. You ever seen those commercials, man, where there's like the guy in the car who's whining and complaining, and his friends say, "You're such a diva," and just eat it. You always turn into a diva. He's like, I'm really botching the commercial here, aren't I? Just edit in me doing a perfect job at telling this story. Just edit in the commercial. Whoever's editing this later. You know what I'm talking about? Those Snickers commercials where they say, you always become a diva when you're hungry. And so they hand him a Snickers.
Yep.
There it is. They hand him a Snickers. And then he's fine. Right? So what if Sabaoth, who's such a diva, isn't he? What if he just ate a Snickers? Right?
I have an image that if Sabaoth ate a Snickers, he would turn into like an anime version of himself with flowers in his hair and stars in his eyes. That's what I see.
His shirt would probably button itself back up, though.
No, it would go a little bit lower.
You want to chime in on this one, Cheryl, or should we move on?
No, just move on. It's fine.
Well, let's talk about our other major villain here. And I've got an excerpt, y'all. I've got an excerpt. This comes from, well, I didn't mark what page, so it's somewhere in the book. Listen to this. I think it really gives a great snippet of what of what kind of leader Thrawn is, especially when compared to and contrasted with kind of what we see in the original trilogy, of course, with Vader and with Palpatine. And then we also see him contrasted with Sabaoth here. Sabaoth doesn't like the way that Thrawn is talking to him. And it says a lot about Thrawn's character. So listen to this. He says, if you kill me, you'll lose the war. Thrawn, that is, reminds the Jedi Master. And if you lose the war, Leia Organa Solo and her twins will never be yours. Sabaoth took a step toward Thrawn's command seat, his eyes blazing even hotter. Then, abruptly, he seemed to shrink again to normal size. You would never speak that way to the Emperor, he said, almost petulantly. Oof, that's a tough one. On the contrary, Thrawn told him, on no fewer than 4 occasions, I told the Emperor that I would not waste his troops and ships attacking an enemy which I was not prepared to defeat. Sabaoth snorted. Only fools spoke that way to the Emperor, he sneered. Fools, or those tired of life. He's such a diva. The Emperor also thought that way, singular, that is. The first time I refused, he called me a traitor and gave my attack force to someone else. The Grand Admiral reached up again to stroke his Ysalamir. That's an image, isn't it? After its destruction, he knew better than to ignore my recommendations. Man, it's a jam-packed excerpt with... see if I can say that 5 times fast. An absolutely jam-packed excerpt with character development for both Thrawn and Sabaoth. So, Freddie, what does this say about what kind of leader Thrawn is, though? What does this say about Thrawn as opposed to the Emperor, as opposed to Vader, as opposed to even Sabaoth?
Well, if Thrawn is one thing, he's efficient. He's efficient with his time. He's efficient with his people, and killing, unnecessarily killing resources is not ideal, whether it's in your everyday job or whatever. And Trump whoops.
Uh-oh.
Wow.
I'm just saying, a leader knows that his resources are valuable, right? And Thrawn knows this. If you can't just waste your average, you can't waste your troops. It doesn't matter where they're at. You just cannot waste them, because then in order for you to get them back, you've got to retrain them, and it causes this whole cycle. And to me, that just shows that Thrawn knows his people are important, not because of who they are as people, but what they are as resources. And because of that, throughout this book, everybody has something to that. I guess a trigger word for Sabaoth is, well, then I won't let you control me, or I won't let you control me, or you can't control them, right? It's like, oh, what? You okay, let's go back to the negotiating table. And I feel like it's such an easy way to go about it. So
Yeah. How about you, Cheryl? What does that excerpt say about Thrawn's character?
Sorry, this is going to be long because Thrawn's my boy.
That's fine, because I'm skipping the next question. So get it all in here.
That Thrawn isn't reckless, that he does not act out of emotion. He values the lives of the men and women that he is entrusted with, and doesn't treat his soldiers as expendable. He's also bold AF. Like, who else tells the Emperor on 4 separate occasions that he's not yet ready to strike, and that he wouldn't waste his troops and ships? Like, he's not a fake it till you make it guy. And the fact that the Emperor didn't just kill him after he refuses to, like, obey the Emperor shows that even though the Emperor was probably, like, super pissed, he still knew that Thrawn was worth keeping alive and was going to prove useful. And I think another moment that I thought really highlighted this type of leadership from Thrawn is when he promotes the tractor beam ensign to lieutenant after he tried to overcome the covert shroud gambit that Luke pulls. So the tractor beam dude wasn't, like, successful, but Thrawn recognized his quick thinking in his attempt, and instead of berating him, he promoted him and gave him his first task is to devise a solution to that particular stunt. And that guy was just like,
yeah,
he's going to serve Thrawn now, like, hardcore.
Well, at least for a little while longer, because Thrawn's going to, of course, going to bite the bullet,
you know what I mean.
The knife. We've talked about all the different traits of Thrawn. We've talked about his different admirable qualities, however, far from perfect. And in particular, though, he underestimates one particular player on the chessboard. Are they called players? One piece on the chessboard, and that is the Nogri, right? So leading into this, though, he's got a lot of different pieces in play. If you think about Thrawn playing this epic game of chess, or what's that one that Empire at War, is that the one that Andrew plays, where it's you move the ships around and battle strategies? Yeah. He's playing one of those for sure. So which of these tools, all right, in Thrawn's arsenal, which of these pieces on the board do you think is the most powerful, Freddie? Is it the Nogri, the Katana fleet, the clones, his tactical brilliance, or this crazy dark Jedi that he's brought onto his team? Which one do you think is most important in Thrawn, getting as far ahead in this book as he does?
Hands down, his brilliance as a tactician, because without his brilliance as a tactician, he would not have had the Nogri under his grasp. He would not have found the Katana fleet. He would not have discovered this whole cloning facility, and Drew Sabaoth would not have ever come into the story. He might have eventually come into the story, but without Thrawn finding all of these pieces, putting them together, and of course, using his opponent's art, whether it's done by themselves or just from the species, and understanding their nuances. I don't think we would have gotten this kind of book without that brilliance.
Yeah, you really see his tactical brilliance, especially the way that he outmaneuvers Bel Iblis trying to outmaneuver him in terms of, are they going to go to Tangreen or Belbringi? And Thrawn sees through their charade, which is amazing.
He also has some of Admiral Akbar's art that he made when he was young.
Oh, I know. That was surprising, wasn't it?
that helps him in that one too.
Yeah, that was a good. And next week we're gonna do a fun game with art. So just hold on to that one, everybody.
Yes.
Cheryl, what do you think? Which of those tools, the katana fleet, the clones, the Nogri, which is the most important for Thrawn?
I'm going to agree with Freddie and say his brilliance as a tactician. Thrawn could MacGyver his way through anything so long as he had an opponent's art to study. So you can give him a paperclip and some art and he will
I love
your
that.
ass. So.
Oh, I've never seen MacGyver. I've only ever seen MacGruber from SNL. So I'm picturing Thrawn as Will Forte. 10 seconds, MacGruber. Well, we've talked about the good guys and the bad guys. Let's talk a little bit about the OTP of this trilogy. And I'm not talking about Luke and Mara. I'm talking about Garm Bel Iblis and Mon Mothma. I had a huge revelation in reading this. Cheryl, what do you think the chances are that Bel Iblis and Mon Mothma were actually just formerly lovers and not just politically opposed, reluctant allies? Am I onto something here?
Maybe just like a long ago night of too much spotchka resulted in a one night stand.
No, for Bel Iblis, it is absolutely Karelian whiskey all the way.
Ah, okay, sorry. So, yeah. I mean, does Mon Mothma have time for
That's a good
romance?
point.
Seems unlikely. So, yeah.
What do you think, Freddie? Do I have something here?
Okay, so it's so funny that you bring this up because whenever I read about them too, I'm like, man, she is super salty about him and he's super salty about her. Like there's no hiding how salty they are with each other.
Yeah.
It's like, well, if I'm going to come back, she needs to ask me for herself. And it could have been after a long night of raiding an Imperial garrison.
I don't want the situation. I don't need the
just
circumstance.
sitting there with a few death sticks.
There's a line somewhere between Massachusetts and California.
But I can definitely see that there might have been a romance, especially because they had the same ideals. But of course, the more they got to know each other, the more they got to realize that they may have been fighting for the same thing, just the wrong way. And
Yeah.
Well, they just had bruised
that too.
egos, I think
That too.
it was too. So.
I don't know. In my head canon, my head legends, they end up together. All right, it happened.
Okay.
At least for me.
That's called shipping.
I don't know. Is that what that's called? Was that a thing in Legends? It's a thing now.
Yeah, no, like Luke and Mara were like, I didn't even know what shipping was, but I wanted them to end up together. So.
Yeah, I guess. Well, I'm shipping Mara and Lando, so to each his own. To each his own. Even though I know how it all turns out. Well, obviously that's a fun pair, but another fun pair, in a very different way, are the Solo twins. How'd you like that for the worst segue there's ever been on Legends Look Back? However, even though they don't get a ton of page time in this book, it's hugely significant that Zahn is introducing a new generation of Solos. Freddie, do you think he had any idea how much these Solo babies would take off in the EU?
I feel with a lot of things that Zahn does, he has an idea of, I'm going to create this canvas. I'm going to put it out into the ether, and, whatever happens, then, it happens. But I don't know if he understood what was going to happen. Of course, two Jedi babies, someone's going to do something with, in terms of a story with those babies. So
okay, so you think he was throwing it up for somebody else to catch the baton? Do you catch
just
batons?
left it, right? I mean, he left a lot of things in this book for growth. So
he actually does some complaining. Zahn does. See if I can pull up quotes for next week about the way people misuse his setups in the next 10, 15 years of Legends. So I can't wait to talk about that. Cheryl, what do you think? Do you think Zahn had any idea of where this was going to go with Jason and Jaina?
I think he must have had a hope for it. How much he could have predicted, I don't know, but I think he must have been certainly pleased with how.
This actually was kind of a point of contention in the difference between the Thrawn trilogy and Dark Empire, because almost said Zahn was pregnant. Yikes! Leia was pregnant in Dark Empire, but then in Heir to the Empire, we found out that they're twins. It's not just one baby, but two. So then later on, Tom Veach in Dark Empire has to retcon the fact that, well, actually, she, in my book, is pregnant with the next kid, Anakin, who plays, his birth is chronicled in Dark Empire. See, all the Solo twins. We got Dark Empire, my book, and we got the Thrawn trilogy, Cheryl's books. So sharing the love with the Solo babies over here. But before we move on, who's the bigger baby? Han or the actual babies? because there's a few points in this story where I'm like, Han is throwing an absolute hissy fit. Do you think that, Freddie, do you think that Han is more childish than his actual kids?
It's funny because I don't have any kids, so I can't really relate too much. But I could see if I was in the situation, I'd be like, wait. In some instances, it's like I want some attention. Like, what about me?
Yeah, maybe that's what it is. The outcry of attention. The kids are getting all the attention. He's like the older sibling,
Yeah.
alongside the father. You want to chime in on this one, Cheryl?
No, I thought you were referring to like the birth scene in this question.
Oh, I might have been. I don't
Instead of
remember.
your baby Han or the actual babies, and I was like, look, he is showing empathy and concern for his wife's well-being while she's going through physical torture and experience of giving birth. So it just makes him a good husband.
No, in my opinion, Zahn really taps into Return of the Jedi with this trilogy. It's the sequel to not the original trilogy, but the sequel specifically to Return of the Jedi. So he writes Han as this kind of buffoonish, bumbling dad. He's got major suburban dad energy in the Thrawn trilogy.
I think he's a good dad in these
No, he
books.
is, but he's very much like,
He's a new dad.
yeah, absolutely. I can relate to that. Do you have kids, Cheryl? Okay, so hey, I'm the only one with major suburban dad energy on this podcast, so it's my word of the highway. All right, one final character before we close this out. We got to talk about the big reveal. And no, I'm not talking about Luuk. I'm talking about Rook, right? Or Rook. How do you say it, Freddie? I know you say it all exotic, don't you?
I just put a little harsher KH on the end. Rook.
All right, that's a good. Why did he do it? Regardless of how you say it, walk me through Rook's thought process. We never really get inside Rook's head other than he's scary and he's loyal to Thrawn. And then there's a knife. Why did Rook do it?
Yeah, first of all, the Nogri, I feel like they're so underrated until you realize how crazy they are in terms of how skilled they are as warriors, especially when they're on that planet and all of the predators just are gone. Everything's gone, and they're like, "What the heck?"
Yeah, that was a big revelation when they realized, hey, this waltz into Mount Tantus was way too easy. And we find out later the Nogri had taken out all of their adversaries.
Yeah, that
big
scene
reveal.
was so fascinating to me, and that was such an underrated part in my opinion. But Rook, ultimately, the species themselves, the Nogri, live by a code of honor and ethics, and
Yeah.
it may be very rigid, but they realize that if someone was doing something to wrong them, that's it. They're done. It doesn't matter what you did before that. If you wrong the Nogri, you wrong the species, you wrong the honor, you are no longer a friend or an ally. And Rook knew that. He felt that through Lady Vader, right? He realized what was actually going on, and that he was not going to stand by and accept his the maltreatment of the Nogris. And of course he was down.
It was also like embarrassment for them.
Yeah,
too.
extremely an embarrassment. And I mean, what would you do if you were a warrior race who realized you were being used and your planet was being poisoned? Right?
Yeah. I'd probably knife my boss, for sure. Cheryl, why do you think Rook did it? We never see him talking to any other Nogri, and we never see him being convinced by Leia. How did he get word? How did this happen?
They reference it in the book that when Luke's talking with I forget which particular Nogri he's talking with, but they said even now word is reaching our commandos that are out doing the Empire's bidding. So they're coordinating, but they're just all going to do it at the same time so that they know that each group knows what's going to happen, so that none of them.
That's how efficient they are.
Taken out. Yeah, and my answer to this was vengeance.
Yeah. I love it. He says, he stabs him and he says, "We are avenged." And I was like, get it, bro. You just get that stabbing. Yeah. Way to go. Also, when Thrawn dies, he smiles, which is kind of crazy. Freddie, did you notice that we've had the wrong quote on our tank top all this time?
I did, and I always thought it was just because of intellectual property and whatnot.
Nope, that was just brain fart on my part.
You know what? Brain fart. It might have saved us a lot of money in the court.
Yeah, who knows? Who knows? However, Cheryl's rocking it tonight. Absolutely rocking it. I was going to wear it, but it's like 17 degrees outside in Massachusetts, and my Star Wars collection room is the draftiest room in my house. All right, one final character beat we're talking about. Everybody, what's your favorite character moment in the book? We've talked about the good guys, talked about the bad guys. We've talked about the weird ones and the babies. So for me, it's when Mara meets Winter. I talked about it earlier in the book. Mara wakes up from her, stasis? Her back to, I don't know. She wakes up from having been basically, near death at the end of Dark Force Rising, and she has been cared for by Winter. And Mara's like, who are you? Winter, very nice person, right? She's basically a stand-in for Leia. She's Leia's childhood friend and look-alike, and I love this interaction when Mara meets Winter. It's basically a now there are two of them moment, isn't it? Because she's like, oh, awesome, there's another Leia. I just love this. And she's so salty about the fact that she's around all the goody-goodies, and it's just perfect, isn't it? Cheryl, what's your...
They're also playing like chess in that scene because they're trying to gauge one another, and Winter is the one with the perfect mind, and Mara is just like super smart. So there's like that intellectual game of chess happening all at the same time, I think.
Yeah, definitely. What's your favorite character moment, Cheryl?
The moment that Mara fully realizes her hatred for Luke was not her own, when she asks, "Who is this son of Vader you keep referring to?" And the Noghri tells her that Luke is Vader's son, and then the full truth hits her like a tidal wave that this was not her own desire, but rather the Emperor's final act of revenge.
Oh, okay.
So very
See, it's just now hitting me too.
It very clearly encapsulates how years of manipulation by a predator will have very real lasting effects on victims recovering from that type of mental abuse. So.
Wow, you took this on a whole new level. I feel like Cheryl's reading a different book than me. She's like getting this on an entirely deeper level. I'm like,
well, because she has to think, she has to sit there and think, how many of my thoughts are my own, and how many have been ingrained in me by someone who's been using me as a tool.
No, you're right. Well, there goes my book. All right, time for the episode to be over. Freddie, what's your character moment?
I have a few character moments, and I was thinking about all of them in the book that I really enjoyed, and it's funny that you didn't like it, but I loved it so much, and maybe it's because I see myself in the underground. Like, I would definitely be out there in the smuggling / information industry. That'd be the slicing, right?
Yeah, with Mazik.
Yeah, and every time the smugglers and that group meet with like the rebellion, for instance, they're just like, oh, we don't trust those guys. I can't remember any of the names at the moment, but it's every time Wedge runs into him, he's one of the
Aves,
yeah, he always runs into Aves, and Aves he's like, who the heck is this? He's like, come on, man.
I never remember.
It's a great bit. It's a really great bit now that you mention it.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites, and especially just seeing the smugglers at the very beginning getting shocked and surprised by the Imperials, to me was one of my favorite scenes, because it just shows like these smugglers are just so out. They have so many illegal weapons, I bet. Like, who knows what they were doing. And, of course, obviously, that was a bit of a setup. But just seeing how capable they are, and how, even though they're not really sponsored by a republic or an empire, they make well more than enough money to outfit themselves and do what it is they need to do to, create this coalition. And that's honestly my favorite moments, is anything to do with the smugglers.
Yeah, I like that. I find it especially meta that you, like Wedge, also forgot Abe's name. Wedge would be proud. Well, Cheryl, you asked me to put in one specific portion in the show notes just for you, which is, give me a chance to say anything I feel like you've left out. So this is your moment, Cheryl. Did we miss anything? We've gone almost 2 hours here. What have we left out?
I know. I feel bad. I feel bad if I keep on talking. I just like the moments when like Mara would always she would reach out and take Luke's hand when she asked him like, okay, kill me, don't let me join.
That was heavy.
Just promise me that you'd kill me instead. And then Luke touches Mara's hand when asking her to accept the role of liaison between the New Republic and the smugglers. So it's all about the hand touching in Star Wars. And
the hand touching. Yeah. I see what you're doing there. Well, we've talked tonight about the characters, and it's been epic. Freddie, did you want to say anything about anything we missed? I'm just gonna blaze past
just
you
think
there.
The smugglers and the no greed
Just the
are
smugglers.
definitely my favorite part of this whole book.
So you get any closing thoughts? And he says, just the smugglers.
It's just the
I love
smugglers.
that.
I love them.
Well, we've talked about the characters tonight, and boy, have we ever. Next week, we're going to get into the overarching questions. You know, the big, heavy-hitting questions like this. What is the Porkins formation? And what would you do with a mountain full of clones? And does the smuggling coalition actually make any sense? Because, in case you can't tell by my question, I don't think so. Anyway, should Luke have given Mara his father's lightsaber? The lightsaber. The big one. The blue one with the thing. That lightsaber. Mara's got it. We're going to talk about that next week and so much more. So, in the meantime, we've got so much that you can do to interact with us in between shows. That does it for this week. Do want to say thank you to Meg, our producer. Thanks to Nathan, our video editor, who's been with us in the chat tonight. Appreciate that, man. And thanks especially to our incredible patrons, just like Cheryl. And you can get in, like Cheryl, on the behind the scenes of Utini with access to all kinds of bonus shows, including Meg's new show. Meg, you've got a new show. My camera just died. Oh my gosh. That's how long we've gone. Meg's got a new show. And you can also get on Calf Faves, Bounty Hunt, Lightspeed Skipping, and so much more. Now that we're live on Twitch, you can help us out by subscribing, either the old-fashioned way or with Prime Gaming. Also, we want your questions. Email us. Give us a text. Give us an audio file. legendslookback@utini.com. Or leave us a voicemail. 508-686-1158. That's 508-686-1158. You can, of course, also talk to us in the Legends Look Back Discord channel, which has been hopping this week. Absolutely hopping. Or, leave us a message on this episode on YouTube, or you can find us on Twitter. I'm at Jared Q. Mays. Freddie?
At Wake Up Freddy.
Meg?
At Meg Dowell.
And Cheryl.
At Cheryl K. Bell.
If you're looking to buy some of these books and want to help support the show, look up a book on Utini. Click the Amazon link in the profile, or the Thrift Books link, or the eBay link. We've got them all, and we'll get a few cents to help keep the lights on. Another way to help us out and show your love of Utini is by grabbing some swag from Teespring. Voice kind of cracked there, but you know what? You can check out the incredible swag that's sported by Cheryl herself, including our It Was So Artfully Done tank, not artistically. Anyway, that was totally on purpose, I promise. Also, we've got a brand new line of merch with masks, hoodies, long sleeve tees. And, of course, if you read any of these books, head over to utini.com and leave us a review. Let us know what you think. And in the meantime, we'll be back next week with part 2. Between now and then, remember to keep the Utini fan code and be a force for positivity in the fandom. May the force be with you.
This is a Utini broadcast.